Welcome to the podcast, Shirley. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm especially excited because I can't wait for you to share, but your experience, your career, where you've come from. But before we dive into all those things, why don't you just let everyone listening know who you are?
Sure. My name is Shirlee Engel. I'm the founder and principal designer at Shirlee Interiors. It's an interior design firm of one, so just me so far, but growing fast and hoping to maybe make my first hire this year. My background is a bit unique in what I bring to this. I spent about 15 years as a TV reporter, covering local, national news, traveling the world with the Prime Minister of Canada, and then transitioned from that to communications and public affairs consulting, and then did a total 180 during COVID and now running my own design firm.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to dive into that because you're the first person I've spoken to who comes from that background. I mean, it's
really?
not uncommon for designers to have a first career. But this is the first time I've heard of someone having this first career. So I'm really excited to hear about that and how it's, I'm sure, going to be helping you along the way as you grow your company and you grow your business. Why don't we start with that? You were TV reporter traveling the freaking world, and now you are interior design. Can we please talk about that transition? What made you decide to pursue this passion? And, what did that look like, that transition?
Well, I can tell you, Rebecca, it was the hardest decision I've ever made in my entire life. Journalism is a tough career. It looks very glamorous from the outside. And the way journalists like to describe it is, 90% of the time, it's like any other job. It's a grind, it's a slog. You walk in and you're like, what am I going to cover today? But 10% of the time, it is exhilarating and euphoric. And I lived for that 10% of the time. So, from the traveling the world to being on the front row, basically, of history and a lot of very significant events, it was really great. But the business itself has really changed a lot. And it's a really tough business. And it's an especially tough business for moms and for women who are, I wouldn't say I'm old, but I am in my 40s. And, I took a look down the road and thought to myself, what's my growth in this industry? Where am I going to be in 5 years? And is this industry going to be nice to me when I'm 50, maybe when I'm 55?
Right.
Looked down the crystal ball and thought, this is not for me. And there were a variety of reasons, but it was really hard to leave. And I think a lot of designers will relate to this because journalism was an identity for me. So I was paralyzed, frozen, unable to make a decision for years. And finally, it got to a point where I was turned down for a major promotion overseas. And I just decided that, this is my sign. I need to move on. So the natural progression from journalism is to communications, right? Because it's what we know best. We go to the other side, the dark side, some like to call it, but it never felt right. I never got that rush. I never felt like an identity. And then I went into client work and public affairs work, and the same thing. It didn't feel like that. And going through COVID was really hard. At the same time, I had a passion for design since I was a little kid. My dad's an architect. My mom's a real estate agent, so houses were our thing. I grew up in very large houses in Toronto. We were constantly moving. And when I bought my first home and started renovating, I really fell in love with it and became obsessed with HGTV. On my birthday one year, I decided on a whim to enroll in an interior design course. And at first it was just for fun, but very quickly it became clear that this was my next move.
So you were working full time, I imagine, at that time when you took the course. And so as you took the course, did you know that you wanted to start a design business, or was it just out of interest?
So I'm someone who doesn't really do things halfway. My husband was like, just do it for fun. Don't put pressure on yourself. But very quickly, I realized that this was the next identity, if you will. This was something that I could be as passionate about as I was about journalism. And at the time I was working with a coach, and I said to my coach, is this crazy? This is such a 180 for me. Who does this? Are people going to take me seriously as a designer? And she was the one who said, it's not that big a change. If you think about it, you're just going from telling certain kinds of stories to telling other kinds of stories. Because the one thing I felt after I left journalism was I said to people, creatively dead inside. Like I felt like I needed a creative outlet. And I feel like design allows me to, tell stories in people's homes, because really our homes, I believe, are a story, and we need our homes to reflect the story of us, the story of our families. And so, whether it's putting together clips and assembling video, or putting together a design, I'm helping to tell stories in a different way. So that was really pivotal for me. That was like an aha moment. I was like, oh my God, like this is almost like the permission I needed to be able to go on this path and be passionate about it. And, she also said to me at the time, and this is something you reinforce in Power of Process, is that, you've got to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, then how are other people going to believe in you? How are clients going to believe in you? And, you've never done anything. And, basically she said, everything you've done so far, you've been able to do, to the best of your ability. So why would this be any different? And I thought, she's right. So I tried to do both. I did the course. I started getting clients really quickly, at first friends of friends. And it snowballed so quickly that I got to a point where I was trying to do both, I went down to part-time at my full-time job. I was doing the course, I was doing client work. And I realized, what, if I want to do this, I got to go all in. And I did. And it was scary, but I very quickly enrolled in Power Process, and it's been okay. It's been good.
Holy cow. Okay. So much to talk about. Okay. So let's just take it back for a minute. We will talk about your experience inside the course. I really want to hear that. But before we get there, a couple things that really stood out to me in your story. One is that you listened to like signs from the universe. And this is the woo-woo in me coming out, and you from doing Power Process, I'm a little woo-woo, but I think there's so much about that. What you said, that you were paralyzed, or you said something along those lines where you were paralyzed with unable to make that decision. It's like you wanted to make that move, but your identity was so wrapped up in what you were doing, what you've done for so long, and who you thought you wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a powerful message, because we can shift, our identity can shift, and our identity and our desires and our goals for life can change, and it's okay. And I think you're a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really, a key point to think about. I wanted to be a reporter for as long as I can remember. I know my mom took interior design in university, like way, way, way back. And I remember thinking about that. And she went into real estate, and she reinvented herself at the exact same age I reinvented myself. So that was a big inspiration, that my mom was able to become a successful realtor after being a stay-at-home mom for years and raising us. So I had that as an inspiration. And I also just realized that I was really unhappy. I was so unhappy, and I didn't want to be that unhappy for the rest of my career. And then when I went into communications, I was happier because I was less stressed out, and, I felt like I had more time with my kids. But I also thought, okay, so I guess this is it. I guess I'll focus on my kids and my personal life and being a mom. And as much as I love being a mom to my two girls, I just felt like I was capable of more. And Rebecca, one of the really interesting things was a lot of women, and moms in particular, don't think of themselves as entrepreneurs. And I certainly didn't. And so that was a big leap for me, reinventing myself as an entrepreneur. I thought, I don't want to be the boss. I don't know how to run a company. How am I going to do that? Yes, maybe I could be a manager somewhere, but, I've got to be responsible for everything. And that was terrifying. And I think one of the beauties of the era that we're in, and of the time that I made my transition, is that there is so much support out there. There's a whole community of people who want you to succeed, who want to be there with you, who want to help you. And, my perception of designers was probably the stereotype that a lot of people think, which is, oh, it's an insular industry. They're going to be snooty. They're going to judge me. I don't have like luxury taste. Will clients take me seriously? And I realized I was in my own way. And so I think get out of your own way is probably one of the first things you got to do if you do something like this.
Stop believing the stories that you're telling yourself, because that's what they are. They are just stories that you have created that no one else has told you. And we do tend to hold ourselves back. I mean, so you listen to signs from the universe, and I love that you leaned into advice. Like you said, you were talking with a coach and they helped. And I think it speaks to what you said, where you've discovered this community of supportive designers, that when we are supported in community or with a handful of people, we feel so much more capable and able to take on that thing. So you had a coach cheering you on. Right now you're in the community of designers. I know you're in all the things that we do, but it just goes to show that when you're on your own, it can be really hard. It's hard not to listen to those stories in your head. And for someone as strong as you very much appear to be, and you're very driven, I can tell, even for you, those stories were weighing on you. And I would imagine to the outside, everybody looked at you thinking, well, Shirlee's got it all together. She's got it all in the bag of chips, right?
Yeah, hardly. And I still feel that way, that imposter syndrome that I think a lot of new designers and even seasoned designers can admit to feeling. We all feel that. I felt that as a journalist when I first started. I showed up in Ottawa, Canada, which is the capital. I was the youngest television reporter on Parliament Hill covering politics. And I felt completely in over my head, but I had a supportive boss and supportive colleagues, and they made me believe in myself. And you know what? I was able to make it in that world. And so I think having another career before, rather than being sort of oh no, I missed out, like I've got so much time to make up, I actually think it's made me personally a better designer and a better client manager, which we can talk about is, there's design, but then there's running a business, and they're not the same thing. So all of that life experience, rather than seeing it as, oh, wow, this has nothing to do with what I did before. And, particularly as a journalist, a lot of journalists are like, oh no, what am I going to do next? Well, my coach really told me to lean into those skill sets that I had. I had presentation skills, I had creativity, I had storytelling skills, I had the ability to really get inside people's heads, to interview them, to understand and learn about them, and really be able to convey what they're feeling and the story of whatever was happening to them as a journalist. Well, translating that to design, and I encourage designers to think about, their own situations and how this could work. Well, it's the same process. You go into a home of someone you've never met, and you've got to get to know them pretty fast. And you got to, keep an eye on the books on their shelves and, what's their style, what's their wish list, and dreaming with them, right? And then taking that and turning that into a vision that you can then implement in design. So think about the ways that you can draw on what you've already done and the skills you already have, no matter what you've done before. And chances are a lot of them are transferable, and you should lean into those. And those are your superpowers, really.
Totally. I love that advice. I'm always saying to designers, don't hide what it was that you did before. Like, talk about the thing, whether you worked in corporate, you were in marketing, you were a reporter, those things, those past careers add value to what you do. And they tell your clients that you have a breadth of life knowledge. And I think I tend to see designers downplay their previous careers, or they were a teacher. I'm not going to talk about how I was a teacher for 10 years. Why not? There's so many skills that are transferable. So I love that message. One more question about that transition, and then I want to move into the design business that you're in now.
Sure.
What was that like financially for you? Changing careers. Did you have to take a hit, or did you manage both until the one took over for the other? So I think that's a big objection that a lot of us humans have to making change in our careers, is the fear of, well, I'm making this steady income, or I'm making this great revenue in my business. If I shift gears and if I do something else, that's going to be a financial hit. So I'm not going to do it. So maybe you can just speak a little bit about that financial transition.
Yeah. And I remember posting in Facebook groups about this and trying to find information myself, because that was, I would say, one of the main barriers for me. I, own a home. I have a mortgage. I have 2 kids. It's not like when I took a chance to become a journalist, I basically volunteered and then got my foot in the door. So this is, the same kind of process 20 years later. First of all, I couldn't have done it without my supportive husband. He has a full-time job. And we sat down and we thought, okay, how much do we need to break even? Obviously we can, shave spending here and there, but what is our absolute break even? And how much do I need to make every month in order to make this happen? So we had that number in our heads. I was fortunate to work for a public affairs firm in town with an extremely supportive boss who is herself an entrepreneur and was really my early champion. And super supportive. And she allowed me to go down to part-time. So I became kind of an independent contractor, and I still had a certain number of hours I was doing each week. So I could rely on that income to support me. And then I would bring on design clients, but I looked at that as more a bonus. That's like breathing money, breathing room. But for a long time, I stayed in that committed certain number of hours a week at this managing client files and doing public affairs. But Rebecca, it got to a point where last spring, in all honesty, I started having panic attacks. I stopped sleeping at night. Things were getting so busy on both sides that I felt like I could no longer do both. And it was a real wake-up call for me that I needed to take care of my mental health and that I needed to figure out, am I doing this or am I not? So there was a moment where I did jump off the cliff. And talk about the universe. This is another lesson that I've learned, which, for everybody it's different. But for me, that paralyzing fear of, oh my God, I'm going to officially leave this parachute that I have, not knowing what's on the other side, and I'm going to take a chance. And I was fully expecting, my husband was like, don't worry, we'll make it work. We'll figure it out. And I was thinking about, cashing out my stocks that had crashed.
Oh no, yeah, that's right.
And
That's
a funny thing happened, Rebecca, when I did that was that entrepreneurial hunger. Don't underestimate that hunger, because at the time I was renovating my kitchen, which I thought would be a good portfolio piece. And I was planning the renovation, and I had interviewed a number of contractors. And I remembered back to one who actually didn't even hire, who I told about my design interest and, how I wanted to launch a design business. And he looked at me and he said, I'd hire you in a second. And I thought, I'm going to call that guy. So I did. And because I thought, what do I have to lose? Well, they're now a client of mine and they send me my biggest projects.
Wow.
So I left one thing, and then all of a sudden my plate started filling. And then I had more time to devote to, working on my website, doing your course. And I started to fill my time. And then when I announced on LinkedIn and to my community and to my audience, like, this is what I'm doing now, gulp, people started emailing me. And they started approaching me. Oh, you're doing this now. Oh, I want to renovate my house. Or, hey, I'm thinking of buying a condo. Could you decorate it? And people just came out of the woodwork. So
Wow.
I'm not saying that's going to happen to everybody, but for me, I find sometimes you got to take the leap in order for things to come your way. And at least in my situation, trying to do both at the same time, I was burning the candle at both ends, and I wasn't doing my best work, and I wasn't doing either one well. So sometimes it takes a leap of faith, and it's scary.
Totally. I love that. Thank you. That's a really good message, because I know that there are people listening who are, whether or not maybe they're not a designer yet, they might be hoping and wanting to do it and dabbling in it and afraid, or maybe they have a design business, but it's a little bit different. We've talked to designers in our community that are doing home staging, but they really want to do full service design or whatever it might be. And I think that's a really good lesson, that you need to almost open up the space to allow the possibility. Because when you are and I have done this myself, between straddling coaching and online courses and running an interior design firm, I feel the way probably that you felt, where I'm like running 2 things and I don't have the time to dedicate to one or the other with full intention. Yeah. Which is why I have made a decision mentally that I am going to focus on the online. Now, I still have design clients and I'm still working with them, but I have to prioritize one because I can't do both 100% will. And it's so true that then once you make that decision to move in one direction, the opportunities start to appear like magic.
They do.
And it will happen. It will happen. It may not all happen as quickly as it did for you. It can look different, but it's true of anything in life, I think.
And I think being an entrepreneur, like I talked about that hunger, because I have dear friends of mine who really cheered me on early on. One of them is an entrepreneur, and, you know, he just said, look, you got to put yourself in the situation where you have that hunger, and it's that you have no choice. You've got to make it work. The situation I was in, you know, last spring was I could have done it, or I could have stretched it out. And I, you know, and then I remember there's someone that I follow on Instagram who I just absolutely love, Claire Leroy, the Little Design Corner. If you don't follow her already and you're an aspiring designer or an existing designer, I highly recommend it. And I just remember reading a lot of what she sent out there, which was just, you know, put everything you got in it, you know, entrepreneurship, you've got to be obsessed with it. You've got to work hard. And she's got all of this really positive messaging to really push you along. And you got to do the work. You know, it's not going to come to you if you're trying to do all these other things, and trust yourself and trust the universe. It sounds woo-woo. It sounds kind of hokey, but, and you know, it's not always roses and sunshine. It's not always going to go well, but you have to be prepared and open to the possibilities. It's like, I remember being single and being like, when am I going to meet, you know, the one? You've got to just put yourself out there and be open to it, you know? So don't be in the wrong relationships. Don't be in the wrong.
And I'll just add that, yes, you need to put in the work, but if your heart isn't in it, if you're not passionate about it, then doing the work isn't going to work. Do you know what I mean? It's like, like if you're in the wrong relationship, you can keep working at it and working at it. And it's like, oh, it's like, why can't we just be happy? Why can't we improve our sex life? Why can't we do whatever it might be? Because it's just not, it's not for you. And same thing with a career and a business. And so, yes, work hard as an entrepreneur, but as an entrepreneur, I firmly believe that entrepreneurs are naturally passionate about the product and the service that they are selling. And so they will, in fact, put in the work and it won't feel like work.
And you have to, it sounds kind of crazy, but you have to be obsessed with it because, you know, I remember hearing, oh yeah, entrepreneurs, they work like 12 to 15 hours a day. And I thought, that's not going to be me. Well, Rebecca, that's me right now. But you know, the interesting thing is when I sit down to do the work, it doesn't feel like work. And I think that's a really big sign. You've got to really listen to your gut. If, you know, what you're doing, you're so passionate about and you love it. You know, sometimes I go to clients' homes or I'm out shopping or sourcing and people will be like, your job is so cool. Like, look at your job. You have such a fun job. You know, they think all I do is browse stores all day and pick paint colors. Obviously, it's a lot more work than that, but it's true. You know, sometimes I'll be walking around, you know, a showroom or I'll be sourcing tile or something. And that's the kind of thing I used to do for fun on the weekend. So it's kind of nice that, you know, yes, you're working long hours and yes, it's a big commitment. And yes, do I see my kids as much as I did before? Right now, not really. You know, but it's work that you enjoy. The other really amazing piece of advice that I got from this early coach that I talked to is she said, the first year of business, it's like, think about it like being in labor. Like you're giving birth to a business. So yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, it's going to be painful. Yes, it's going to be exhausting and long hours. But at some point, that baby is going to grow and mature and it'll be your baby and other people will help you take care of this baby. And so that analogy was super powerful for me. And it kind of helps me on those days where I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. This is so much work and I just want some time off and I just want to veg and watch Netflix at night. But I can't because I'm working on my website or I'm working on this thing. But it's not forever. And at some point, you know, and you're the example of this, it's going to balance itself out and you'll be able to set those boundaries, right?
Yeah. And I will add that at the beginning, it's like anything, it's exciting, it's a novelty, it's new. And so work comes easy and you want to do it, but there does come a point where it will get hard and you may not love every aspect of what you do. And as an entrepreneur, if you want to be successful, those are the times you just have to recognize either A, I'm going to push through and get this thing done for the bigger picture, or B, maybe I need to outsource this or hire someone to help with this task, because it's not realistic to paint a picture that if you love what you do, it's not going to feel like work. Because I can tell you there's a lot of interior designers who are listening, who are feeling burnt out, they're feeling tired, and they're wondering if they still love interior design. And I can say it's probably because you pushed and you kept working, you didn't have a balance or limits. And at some point, the fun doesn't feel fun anymore because the novelty wear off and you're trying to do too much. And so you need to evaluate, okay, what is it really? Let's go back to what lights me up. What was it about design that attracted me to it? Okay, I want to focus on those tasks because as you mentioned, Shirlee, when you run a business, there are so many hats that you have to wear. It is not just about the design anymore. It's not just about the craft. It's about setting up the back end, the systems, the website, the marketing, the process, the client communication, customer service, the finances, possibly the hiring, if you're hiring people, the HR side. It's a very complex business. And so making sure that you keep checking in with yourself, like, okay, why did I get into this again? What is it that I'm passionate about? I need to focus in that area because there are peaks and valleys in any business for any entrepreneur. So if anyone who's listening is like, oh, it used to be like that, that's like the honeymoon phase, I just want to remind you that it can be like that again. Right.
And the way what you're describing is how I felt when I was a journalist. You know, the novelty wore off, but the difference, at least I think, is that was really, I was working for someone else and that was the job. And there were other jobs, but I didn't get to decide if I got to move up or get those jobs.
Yeah.
The thing I love about entrepreneurship, and in particular, the world we live in right now, where there's all kinds of different revenue sources. And I know you talk about this a lot too, Rebecca, like if it's not lighting you up anymore, as an entrepreneur, you can pivot tomorrow. You know, you can decide, you know, and that's a little simplistic, obviously, you know, wind down what you're doing and all of that. But the concept of you can start right away to vision what the next phase looks like, right? Your fate is not in someone else's hands. And I think that's what I find exciting when I think about it, because, you know, I do get bored. I'm someone who likes change, who thrives on change. And yeah, of course, there will come a time where the novelty of this will wear off. I'm probably pretty far away from that because there's so much still to do. But, you know, if and when I do reach that point, I like to think that there are so many avenues that I can explore and evolve into, whether it's outsourcing, as you said, or adding products, or going into, you know, the influencing side, or there's just so many different ways to express yourself in this business. And I think that flexibility and the opportunities, there's so many opportunities to reinvent yourself. As I know you encourage people to do, even when they take Power Process and they've been doing this a really long time. You know, sometimes you need to get outside your own head.
Totally. And I think that's a really great message. You know, who was it? I think it was, that guy with the muscles, Ed Milet, I want to say. I don't know if it came from him, but he said, and I heard him on a podcast say recently, to be successful as an entrepreneur, and this is not going to be what anybody wants to hear. You probably don't want to hear this either, but this is, I'll explain it in a second, is to be a successful business person, or the most successful entrepreneurs are the ones that keep doing it even when it's no longer fun. And now that's not the message I want to send. I want to clarify that, but they keep doing it even when it's difficult and it's not fun or it feels boring, because it's pushing through. It's continuing. It's that consistency over time that will bring the success. So what I mean by that is, obviously, if something doesn't light you up and it's not for you, don't do it. But if you are encountering resistance because, the invoicing is driving me mental, or I hate dealing with the clients, or there's an aspect or two of your business that you start to learn, shoot, I didn't realize I needed to do this. This isn't really for me. that doesn't mean that you need to throw in the towel and move on to something else. So as much as we're talking today about the beauty of a transition and change, I just want to make sure anyone who's listening knows that it's not because, like, you made a big life change for lots of different reasons. And you've already kind of expressed that. And I think that's really important to understand, that also to be successful, especially when it's your own business, because you have, like you say, you have that flexibility. Bring somebody on to help with a certain aspect that you don't enjoy. Maybe pivot a little. Maybe you're still running your business, but maybe now you sell products, or you're licensing, or you have partnership deals with brands. There's so much opportunity. So I just sort of want to throw that out there for anyone who's in a hard season, who's listening to this and saying, oh, like, it's just not clicking for me anymore. Maybe I should make a big change. Maybe you should, but maybe it's just small tweaks too.
Yeah. And I think too, you know, something that we've all heard, that famous book, you've got to schedule the time to work on your business, not just in your business. And I think there's, you know, it's imperative that you, at certain points in the year, whether it's quarterly or, you know, biannually or whatever works in your business, schedule the time to vision, to take a step back and ask yourself those hard questions. Do I like what I'm doing? How are things going? What do I not like? What do I like? And, you know, that was another thing that I found really powerful in Power of Process, that's the beginning of the road, which is just put on the brakes for a second, step outside your business and really ask yourself, like, what's working, what's not working. And that's work. And you've got to do that. And sometimes it involves facing some ugly truths and some things that you have been bothering you for a long time, but that you didn't quite think about in that way. And then it's about trying to find ways to overcome that. And I can't, you know, overstate the importance of having a community, because being an entrepreneur is extremely lonely. Like, I spend a lot of time sitting by myself at my, you know, kitchen island doing my work, and I don't have colleagues. But because I've really reached out and branched out in the online community of designers, I don't feel that as much, because you know, I can't go into an office or a newsroom and schmooze with people, because I'm a very social person. And so I think, you know, that loneliness is also a part of it, and how much of that plays into it. And do you maybe need to, you know, bring someone on or get out there a little more, whatever it is. I think just taking the time to reflect is really important. And that's hard to do when you're putting in those.
Well, it's hard to take the time. I know for me, like the first few years in business, I was earlier on in my just life, right? And so I didn't have the life experience that a lot of designers have when they come at interior design as a second or third career. And so for me, I was like, I don't have time. I don't have time to do that. I don't have time to work on my business. I don't even have 5 minutes. I'm the busiest person in the world. I don't have time was like my motto. And so you're right. It's forcing yourself to make the time to reflect, to look at those things. And that is one of the many things we do inside the course. So this would be a great time to talk. I'd love to understand, how did you find me and the Power of Process? And what was it about that course that made you think, this is for me, I'm going to sign up?
Yeah. So how did I find Rebecca? Well, I was doing a lot of looking online at inspiration photos, and I came across an HGTV feature on this house you did in, I think it was in Oakville or Maple, just outside of Toronto. And I seriously fangirled that house because I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I remember seeing, you know, who's the designer on this? And I looked you up and I was like, oh, wow. Like, imagine having a business like her business, you know? And then I looked you up on social media and realized that you have this community and that you're actually really approachable. And I remember the first time I heard your voice, I was like, that's not how I expected her to sound. Like,
oh my gosh.
I thought you were sort of this, you know, really accomplished, and you are a very accomplished designer, but out of reach for me. And when I realized that you offer this, you know, coaching and that you have a course, I thought, oh, wow, that's interesting. Now, I am someone who comes to online courses with a bit of skepticism, because I have done a lot of online courses and I see them everywhere, and I'm pretty marketing savvy. And so I get the whole funnel, and you watch the webinar and they suck you in and they give you a discount code and all of that. So I just want to put it out there that I was uber skeptical, especially paying, you know, high prices for courses. But when I learned more about Power of Process, I listened to your podcast, which was like, I totally binge listened to the podcast. And there was so much, great advice on there for free, basically, like that I was really using and leveraging. And I thought, wow, if this is what she talks about in her podcast that everyone can listen to, I can only imagine what I'll get inside this course. I would say the thing that really there were two things that really caused me to sign up. The first was, your course is different in that it's a live course. So a lot of courses that I looked at were, okay, here's the material, have fun, good luck, hope it works for you, reach out if you have any questions, and you're off, and there you go. But in your course, you're right there with the students the whole time, and you've created a community and meeting other designers and having those calls. And when I started to see all of the things that I would be able to do, and that accountability piece, I think, at least for someone like me, was so important, because if I don't have a deadline or an accountability mechanism for something, it's hard for me to get it done. So I love that. And then I would say what really kind of tipped me to, press the buy button was the day that the first project that contractor I told you about earlier, the design build firm, called me up and gave me a full house renovation that morning. I hung up the phone, I logged onto your site, and I bought Power of Process, because I was like, I'm not starting this project without knowing, without having
holy shit, here we go, I'm in the big leagues now.
Yeah, like, okay. And they aligned really well. And so I wouldn't say that like I didn't have my process down pat going through that project. And I'm just delivering that design binder tomorrow, and the reno is starting next month, and I'm super excited. But having that community as I was starting the biggest project I had done to date was really, really amazing. And I remember hearing, whether it was you on another podcast or somewhere, that, oh yeah, it might seem like a lot of money, but the value that you get out of it. And, partway through the course, I was like, oh, this is totally worth it. Like, because I have taken courses where I didn't feel that way. And I have to say that, it's also the fact that you keep it, like, it doesn't just end and you're done. Like, you can have access to the materials, you can take it again. And you have all that community that you met during Power Process that is yours to, to continue with.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm so happy. Those are all the reasons why I love the course. And I have had people say, like, why don't you just make it go evergreen? People can take it anytime. And it doesn't work for me, because there's something about, I think it's the camp counselor in me. Like, I love everyone getting together, and I agree with you, accountability. I'm the type of person that if I buy an online course and it is not live dripped modules where there's a community of people, I'm probably not going to do it all. Like, I might do the first module, and then life gets busy and it sits on the shelf, and I probably won't go back to it. I'm not going to lie. I don't even want to calculate how many thousands I've spent on online courses that I haven't finished. Yeah. And even when I do a live course, sometimes I'm like, I'm falling behind, but at least, you can like catch up. You can go back, you can watch the replays. There's all kinds of community, as you say. I love that. And you were such a vocal contributor right from the get-go. Like, in our first study hall, we're like, Vera and I were like, who is this Shirlee woman, the broadcaster? I'm like, I like her. She's going to be good. She's going to be successful. We knew it, because you were asking the questions, you were showing up, you were doing the work, and sharing to your experiences with the rest of the community. So it's really so much of these online courses is a lot about, you get what you put in. Yeah. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but you do, if you show up, you don't have to be the one talking and asking questions, but showing up, listening, doing the homework, spending time doing the reflection, that's when you see the results. And, you need to focus on your business in order to grow it so that you can just be in it and enjoy it.
Yeah. And I'm still working on Power Process. Even now, I've done I've watched all the videos and I've downloaded all the materials, but I find especially the first go, it's so much to take in, because you just offer so much value, and there's just so much to do. There's a lot of work. and you don't get to do all the work. But I found the constant reinforcement in the study halls, Vera saying it often and you saying it often, there's no such thing as falling behind. You can always have this later. Everybody's at different points. And just that reminder that, you're not behind, you're not falling off the deep end. You can always come back to it and do it as you go, and having the course kind of open if you've already taken it, and be able to go back to the modules, and then being able to do it again with another live cohort, which some of the designer friends that I've made have done. I can see why doing it again would, you'd have a whole other lens on it, because, 6-8 months later, you're in a different place in your business than you were the first time. And, even just last night, I was working on some power of process stuff. And one thing that I realized too, is a lot of the exercises that I did helped accelerate other things in my business. So I'm about to launch my website. I've worked super hard on it, and writing the copy for my website. Well, I did so much of that work during Power Process. So when I wanted to, what am I going to say in this section, and how am I going to do this? Then I would go back and go to those documents that we workshopped, and I got live advice from you, and you helped me edit some of it and said, maybe say it this way, or I didn't quite get what you meant here. And so I already had that feedback, and then I was able to put that in and not spend so much time agonizing or pay a copy editor or whatever to help with. And also just setting up my workflows. So last night I was working on setting up my workflows, and, I have those checklists from the course. So
oh, yay. I love that. I love hearing all of that. I just want to add to the idea that you can take the course again. What that means for anyone who's listening and doesn't understand that is that once you've signed up and you do the course live, the next time we launch the course, you are welcome at no extra charge to join us in all of the live calls, join inside the Facebook community, and do it again. And I have had people say to me, why do you do that? You should charge people just a small amount. And I'm like, no, I don't want that, because what I've seen, and especially in the cohort that you just did, it was amazing. So many alumni came back to do the course with us, and they offer so much wisdom because they've been through it, they've started to implement, and they're sharing their experience. They're like a tiny little bit further along, and it just really creates this beautiful community of designers that are truly at all levels of the game. Like, you've got designers who are 20 years in the business, taking it, looking to level up, tweak how they do things because they've been set in their ways for so long. And then you have like that fresh, young energy like you coming in. And it's really a beautiful thing to see. And I mean, it lights me up. I love it so, so much. What would you say, Shirlee, how do you think you would be in your business right now if you had not joined Power of Process?
I think about that a lot, actually. And one of the things I remember when I was considering joining is you talked about eliminating the overwhelm. And that word overwhelm was my life. I just felt constantly overwhelmed and kind of being very reactive in my business. So kind of waiting for things to come to me. And once they did, just sort of building the plane while I was flying it. Like, that's how, and I still feel like that. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and it didn't solve all my problems, nor do you promise it will. But, I felt very much like I was feeling around in the dark, and, my business didn't feel organized. And imagine if I'd brought someone in to help me in that. It was just a total mess. So, I think that's the biggest thing is just really having a more organized way of approaching things, feeling calm, like, okay, this project is at this phase. Another huge thing we haven't talked about is pricing. When you first get into the business, or even if you've been in the business for a long time, like, you have no idea what to charge or how to charge. And believe me, I've still put in free volunteer hours on many, many projects because I'm still figuring that out. But there was a lot of help and support and guidance in Power of Process about pricing. And I feel really good about the pricing model I have now. And I think, obviously it'll continue to evolve, but as I start getting more projects that are sort of a level up of my skills and, they're bigger and bigger projects and more complex, I don't have that fear of, oh my God, I have no idea what to charge. And so, yes, you spend money on Power Process, but I'm sure that I will more than make that in just knowing what to charge and how not to put myself in a trap where I end up giving a flat rate for something, which I've done many times, and then realizing I'm 50% over my hours,
Yeah. And then what do
on
you
minimum
do?
wage.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's true. It's so true. I mean, pricing is one of the biggest obstacles I think a lot of creatives face when you're running a creative business, not just designers. We see it with photographers, with graphic designers, and because it's hard, we don't always value our natural inherent talents and understanding what we think our service is worth, but then is one thing. And then, but the other part of it that you mentioned is understanding what everyone else is doing and what's working for other people. And okay, here, and of course I share and I guide everyone through what, I don't know, Siri thinks I'm talking to her. When I guide everyone through, my ways and different ways, but you're right. It's something that's a little bit of trial and error when you have that community to bounce those ideas off of and say, hey, I'm doing it this way, or, oh, wow, I never thought of doing it that way. And that's really neat. Oh, that's really great. That's really interesting. Well, I'm very happy that you took the course. What is next for you? Like, what can we expect to see coming from Shirlee Engel? Like, what is in store for you in 2023?
So I have a number of goals that I'm working towards. I hope to have my first hire this year because I am getting to a point where I'm getting quite busy. Now, whether that's going to be a full-time person, probably not, but just someone to come on and help sort of with some of the things as you learn in Power Process that I don't love doing or don't have time to do. I'm looking to really grow on social media. So that's an area that I'm going to be investing in both just time and also resources, because I think that's so important, and taking on bigger projects and revealing some of the projects I've been working on for so long. Because I think that's one of the other frustrations is, we spend so long laboring over these projects. And by the time you're able to show it, when did I start this project? So being able to get to the finish line on some of those, especially when you're early in your business, you may not have as many of them. And so completing them and then bringing on more will be, a big thing that I look forward to. And my website being live, I've done all of this without even having a website. So I hope once that starts, I start my blog, things will continue to grow.
I love it. I'm so excited. I love watching your journey and supporting you. And I do hope that you will pop in this time around when we do Power Process.
I will, for sure.
Share your wisdom and where you're at and how it's going. Is there anything specific to process in general that, because I know we talk about process, and if someone is new and they're thinking, okay, what is, I don't understand about this process. Is there something that you have found that has helped you, that you have specifically implemented inside your business that is process driven or process related that you could share?
I think trying to break what you do down into phases and figure out what are those phases, and do you have to do all of those phases? And this whole idea of full service design and, what you think you should be doing versus what you are actually doing. And I think having a process really forces you to break it down into steps and think about what steps you like, what steps you don't like. Do you like implementation? Do you like decorating? Do you like and so figuring out and landing on what that looks like for you in your business, I think is a huge help in your process, because then you can more easily put a bow on it and sell it to people and market it and describe it to people. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is just the components of what you do, writing down what it is that you do. And when it's organized in your head, and you get that out on paper and you see what that looks like, I think you can have a better eye on where you want to go and what parts of your business are causing you pain points.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true. For the longest time for me, I worked for another designer for 5 years before I started my design firm, and there wasn't a process. And I just remember thinking, there's got to be a better way. How are other people doing it? I didn't know what to do first, what to do second. It was so talk about overwhelm. I don't even want to go back there. The anxiety that I used to feel. And so I think that's really, yeah. So if anyone's listening, you're like, what? I think you just described it right there. Phases, steps, breaking it down, understanding what happens and first, and then next, and then next. Okay. our time has come to an end, but you know, I always ask a question at the very end of my podcast, if you listen, which you said you did.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, what last nugget of wisdom do you have for our listeners today?
So I have two. The first,
okay.
The first is, might sound kind of obvious, but believe in yourself, because if you don't, no one else will. So, yes, you can have imposter syndrome, or, if you're in your business and you're just feeling like you're not feeling it anymore, just believe that there is a better way and be open to that. And the second thing is, get out of your own way. I can't tell you how many times I build up in my head how overwhelmed I am. I lie in bed with my projects kind of running through my head. I have to do this and I have to do this. And how am I going to get it all done? And when I just stop and sit down and do it, it gets done. So I find we also just stand in our own way a lot. And so take a hard look and see where are some areas that maybe you do that, and how can you get out of your own way to just move forward and kind of break out of that overwhelm, because I think we build things up in our head so much. And so I think that's a really important piece of advice that I've heard that I really try to live by.
I love it. Life advice from Shirlee Engel. Get out of your own freaking way, people.
Yes.
We all need to hear that. Trust me. I'm like, yeah, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about the things that I was this morning. I'm like, Rebecca, come on, shape up, stop it.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well,
I
thank you
wouldn't
so
get up
much. Yes, getting up early is not happening. My son was up like all night. I'm a zombie.
Oh no.
Yeah, sometimes there's certain things that are not in our control and we just have to embrace it. How old are your kids? I didn't ask you that.
4 and 7.
Oh my goodness, they're
Girls.
babies. Yes. Okay,
Yes.
just like me, so little, so busy. Well, thank you so much, Mama, for being on the podcast today. And just let everybody know where they can come find and follow your journey.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Designed by Shirlee, and I'd love to connect with you. And please reach out if anything I said resonated with you, or you just want to say hi. I'd love to hear from you.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Rebecca.